All right. So today we are very honored to have John Hagerman, who's my good friend and fellow veteran, presenting on a topic that's near and dear to his heart, which is transforming. I'm going to let him introduce the topic, but it's on transforming how you think about your situation, your perspective, and how that impacts your results. So this is going to be a transformative conversation, and we're very lucky to have him. So, John, do you want to introduce yourself in the topic?
Absolutely. As Alan said, my name's John Hagerman. I am a vet. I'm a Navy vet. I was very short term in that I got injured during training, so I didn't complete my full tour, and I definitely didn't do a whole career in it, but I was in the Navy, and I thank all of you who did serve a lot longer than I did. While I don't have a lot of military experience, I do have a lot of business experience. I want to tell you a little bit about that background, and then I'll launch into the topic on it. In my business experience, I was one of the top managers, actually top manager out of 2,200 for a big retail chain. I ran 13 stores with 600 employees in Chicago. That was one of the things. I built a music instrument manufacturing company to the #1 of its niche in the world. That was fun. I was named a Minnesota super agent in real estate twice and achieved top 2% status there. And then I built a customer service startup, customer service and innovation training company to a multi-million-dollar status, multi-continent status in less than a year. So those are some pretty good background on that business. It gives me a wide range to draw from in my experience when I'm working with my coaching clients. As far as education, this comes in later, and you'll see that very shortly. I have a bachelor's degree in creative writing, a master's degree in screenwriting. I worked from Hollywood for several years as a script analyst and writer out there. And I'm a very highly trained coach. I've gone through the most rigorous coaching program you can get in the world. So what do I do? What I do is I help principled, mission-driven entrepreneurs who are feeling frustrated because they feel like they're stuck on a plateau, they're unsatisfied, they're afraid they're never going to be able to get where they think they should be, and to get to the level they think they need to be and desire to be. I guide them in creating new stories to eliminate the self-limiting stories most of us have in our repertoire, unfortunately, and help them replace that with limitless stories that create a bulletproof mindset that allows you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve in a much more orderly and disciplined manner on that. It really makes a difference. It can make a difference quickly. You don't need a long process. I went through a long process to get where I'm at, but you don't need a long process to start making changes. That's what I do. What I found is most entrepreneurs, in this case, I'm going to refer to entrepreneurs, I'm talking about people who are in the job market as well. Because as a job hunter, what you're doing is selling yourself. You're the product that is in the marketplace out there, and your customers are the companies that might potentially hire you. With entrepreneurs, obviously, they're looking for customers in a different way, but the processes that they use are going to be very, very similar to what you would use, or can be very similar to what you would use in improving your job hunting skills. Now, there's a lot of financial uncertainty in entrepreneurship, and I know that's something that you are feeling. I have been there. I went through, after the recession, a 2-year period of being unemployed and trying to figure out what to do there. I learned a lot about that process. That's actually where I met Alan, was in that process. I understand you face the same things that I faced, then you face the same things that entrepreneurs face. And what you're trying to gain is some confidence that you know how to work the process, you know how to get where you want to go, and that any obstacles that get in your way, you're going to be overcome. And what I'm going to show you today are a couple of tools that will help you in that process. Now, my story is when I was a child, back on age 6, I suffered a traumatic event and ended up getting PTSD out of the event. We are meaning-making machines as human beings, and when that event happened, I made it mean something. I gave a story to it, and I believed that story. What did that mean? Why did this happen to me? And I lived most of my life by that story. Unfortunately, the story was a very limiting one. It held me back in so many areas. I would get close to the kind of business success I really wanted, a breakthrough level of business success, and then that would fall apart. And that was on me. It wasn't just the world of circumstance out there. I'm the one who controlled what was going on with me. And that really is something all of us do. At some point or other, we hear something, we experience something, we're told something, we see something that we just buy. We just believe it, and that's how we live our lives. Unfortunately, that frequently means you're limiting it, and you don't know why. You've made up a story about something that happened to you. It limits your capabilities, limits where you can go, but you tend not to understand what's going on because it's subconscious. Now, what I want to show you is how to actually start making that conscious and then using it to transform your thinking and really get you that bulletproof mind that you need to really tackle what's in front of you. Now, this first piece that I want to go through is called a decision matrix. It's a fairly simple thing. At least it sounds simple. Your change doesn't have to be, I just get message up. Oh, never mind. I thought I had a message on there. Change doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have, not necessarily easy, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And the solutions I want to give you are simple solutions that when you start working with them, start seeing results, you're going to end up going, oh, this is cool. I like it. Now, a decision matrix, basically every state, every action we take arises from a story that, like I said, happened when we were kids on it. We are consciously or subconsciously believing that story. In the process of eliminating the self-defeating story is to become conscious of it and then actively work to eliminate it. When you take a road to work, for instance, you take that road, the first time you take it in your new neighborhood, you're kind of tentative, how do I get there? Second time, it's a little easier. By the third or fourth time, you're starting to go down there, and before long, it's a main highway for you. You can make that drive without thinking about it. Well, it's the same thing when something happens to us. We have a thought, we have an experience, we believe it. Once it's put in our brains, it's filed away in our unconscious. The next time we think that thought, it gets a little bit stronger. The synapses, every time they fire, gets a little bit stronger connection to that story. And the stronger that connection, the more evidence you'll see to support that connection being right. Whether it is or not, your brain can't think about stuff that's outside of what you think. It makes that meaning. It makes that decision to look for those things. It goes back to our fight or flight responses when we're telling campfire stories, back in the cave, what did we do on the hunt today? What dangers did we experience? What do we want to warn other people about? We started sharing those stories. They become part of our hardwired process of how we look at the world. And we had to at that point, because do we make a mistake here because we didn't listen and we lose our life? Oops, that doesn't work. So you share those stories. Well, most of the time you're sharing all the problems that you face today, so hopefully you don't overcome the same problems. But you get, in that instances, they were learning the same behaviors to repeat over and over and over. Well, if they learned a behavior that wasn't particularly effective, they'd still keep doing it because that's what they trained their minds to do, until somebody would show up around that fire and say, hey, I tried something different and it worked. I got that bear today. I was able to nail that bear. I'd never tried it. We ought to try this. You should try it too. Now there's a new thought going in there. Have any of you ever seen the movie Dead Poet Society? There's a scene in it that really is kind of, I see a hand go up there, that really is kind of explains how this works. In the one scene, Robin Williams has all the students stand on their desk and look at the world. Everything looks different. And if you ever have tried that, I encourage you to try it. If you have, stand on something and just look at the world. It's radically different, even if you're just 2 feet off the ground. That's the same thing as telling yourself a new story. You turn your head 10 degrees and the world's different. A new story is that 10-degree turn of the head. So how you use the matrix, I'm going to pull that up here real quick so you can see what I've got. Okay. The decision matrix on there, the story matrix, is you take a sheet of paper, you put limiting story in one column, empowering story in the next, supporting evidence in the next. So let's say there's a limiting story that you've been telling yourself, that there must be racism or age discrimination because you're never getting a call for an interview. Well, you're looking at that. If you're seeing your mind is, you're telling your mind that there must be racism, there must be discrimination. That's why I'm not getting a call. Guess what? You look in that third column, what's your mind going to see? It's going to see all the evidence to support the racism, the discrimination, the blacklisting, or whatever you're seeing is an excuse to not get the job. Well, it's not your fault because all these things are happening. Your mind sees what it's been trained to look at. In this case, that limiting story is the discrimination on there. Now, if you change that a little bit, you come up with a new story on there. It said there must be racism, discrimination. The new story: companies are attracted to my unique experience, skills, and discipline. Now you may be going, well, wait a sec. How are they going to be attracted? Nothing changed. I just said something different. What happens when you look at that? When the companies, we tend to want to know, how is that going to happen? How is that going to work before we'll make that change? Don't worry about that. Trust it will work. It will absolutely work, because what you're doing is you're starting to train your brain the same way it got trained originally, but you're starting to retrain your brain for that new story. When you see the limiting story, when you think that thought, after you've created a new story, a more empowering story, just notice it. Go, oh, there's that story again, and let it go. Doesn't do you any good anymore. Just let it go, and think of the new story you want to replace with. That companies are attracted to your unique experience, skills, and discipline. And guess what? You'll very quickly start seeing supporting evidence to support that new story. It's kind of like, has anybody ever bought a new car, and all of a sudden the day after you bought your new car, you start seeing that same model everywhere? My wife just bought a new Subaru Forester, and all of a sudden it's like, every time she goes to the gas station, there's 3 other Foresters on it. She drives down the highway, she's surrounded by Foresters. She sees them everywhere. Well, that's what we all do, but that's nothing new. Those cars have always been there. What's happening is she has created a new awareness of them because she's now driving it. It's the same thing with that unique story. When you notice the old story, that limiting story pop up, dismiss it. Just say, that doesn't do me any good. And focus on the new story. Companies are attracted to you. Your brain will start training itself to let go and not even think about that old limiting story, because it doesn't serve any purpose. Your mind will go, oh, that doesn't do any good anymore. I need to be looking at this instead, and starts focusing on that new story. And before long, you're going to start seeing all kinds of evidence in support. You'll see friends and family they keep pointing it out. Well, why do they keep pointing it out? Maybe it's true. Maybe you need to start believing them. Other vets like me, whose same background I've got, the same experience level as everybody else, they're getting jobs. Well, maybe companies are looking for those people instead of discriminating. That's an evidence to support the news story. Companies are advertising for my skill set. That's another piece of evidence. The more you start looking for evidence to support the new story, the more powerful that new story becomes. Now, there's a process out there that some of you may have heard about, most probably haven't. It's called CounterFactual Memory. It's called you can change the past and remember the future. And this process is actually changing the past. When you think about an event in the past in a new way, you've changed that past. it's now going to give you a new set of experiences, a new view on how to do things on. The same thing holds true when you're eliminating a story that has been disempowering you. You look at some of those other stories on there. There must, the races may age on there, or they seem to have all the luck. That was one I used to always think about. And I replaced that with opportunity will find my preparation, and luck will naturally follow. Isn't that what they've always said? Luck is opportunity meeting preparation. Well, I just put that into my new empowering story. And almost immediately, actually, the very first time I used that one on, they seem to have all the luck, and I replaced it with my new story about opportunity finding me. I talked to Alan, and I shared it that day and got the invitation to speak to Eagle Group. Well, that to me is a pretty potent piece of information, a pretty potent piece of evidence that, hey, this is good. It's supporting my feeling that, hey, luck will find me. I think being in front of you guys, in front of all of you, sharing what I've learned from my experience and my training is a pretty fortunate piece of luck for me. Hopefully it will be for you too. But I like the fact that being here is evidence that opportunity is finding me. Finding a right coach at the right time. I did the same thing with that. I started looking for, how do I change my life? How do I change what I really want to do from what I was doing? I really wanted to be in the coaching. I've had 20 years worth of training. I've had decades worth of experience and challenges to overcome and tools that I learned from those challenges. Yet I still felt I wasn't ready until I found a coach that said, hey, why don't you look at it this way? And it started changing immediately. So luck did start finding me. It's another piece of that evidence that your mind finding evidence to support what you've trained it to look for. I like going on here. I don't have any other values other than my skill. I don't have any value other than my skills. And that's not true, because you're each unique and there's nobody like you. And that is where the truth is. The new story could be, says my values lie in who I am and how I do what I do, not what you do. A lot of people may be trained to do exactly what you do, but what you've learned over the years, the process you use, whether it's the physical process, the mental, the emotional process to get the task done, is uniquely you. So when you make up that new empowering story, you're saying, hey, I have all kinds of value outside the physical skills. There's how I use the skills, the process I use for those skills. Those are all part of it. Now you can come up there, what's the supporting evidence? We already talked about the first one. No one can replicate who I am. That's true for all of us. We're all unique in that. My process makes me faster, more efficient, and more accurate. That's true. The more you guys have done something in your training in the military, or your training in the civilian world, the better you get at it. And I know from experience, when you learn it in the military, you've got a view and a discipline for doing it that civilians don't have. And your uniqueness of who you are and how you approach it makes you unique even amongst the military out there that are competing for the same jobs. You are uniquely you. That's the evidence on there. That's what works to overcome that. And other evidence might be how others respond when you mention them. Think about when you were in the service, you had a job to do and you were told, hey, show somebody else how to do this job. You did it and they responded. You proved, hey, I'm good at this. That's another evidence of where your value lies. Now, another one that I've heard from military is that people won't follow you without rank authority. My brother was a retired lieutenant colonel from the Guard. He started off as a private and worked his way up to lieutenant colonel. And even when he was working his way up when he was a sergeant, people followed him. People constantly work to try to impress him, try to get his approval, because he had that natural authority in who he was and how he did things. He was a compassionate listener. He was a patient instructor, all that. That was just part of naturally who he was. So the people naturally followed and respected him as the powerful leader he was on the inside. That's an empowering new story. Instead of people won't follow you because you don't have the rank authority in the civilian world, guess what? Your natural leadership is what they're going to follow, and that's uniquely you. So what's the evidence on that? Your opinions are valued. Were they valued in the military? My guess is they're valued outside the military. People seem to notice my bearing. When you've got that experience, that knowledge, that confidence in what your knowledge is and what you're capable of, you tend to carry yourself different, and people look and react to you differently than they might otherwise. Prospective employers are impressed by my experience during interviews. I don't know, even if you don't get the job, if you've gone on an interview, you may get some positive feedback on your experience on that, some impressions on that. That's feedback, that's evidence saying, hey, this new story is right. This new story has some potency to it. Those limiting stories, I mean, my story around the PTSD dominated my life for almost 40 years. Before I discovered it and went, oh, what is this? And it was another 15 years before I went in and went through EMDR training, therapy to get rid of it and actually learn to control it. That was a long time to let one story dominate me. If I'd learned this process earlier, I would have been able to use the process to eliminate a lot of the effects of that PTSD. The PTSD, I was fairly EMDR, got rid of pretty quickly, but the habits and the thought patterns I'd learned as a result, I'm still trying to work through. I'm still working through some of those, but it makes it so much easier when they say, oh, I just caught myself thinking that way, that they all seem to have all the luck. What's the new, the new thought, the new story is, hey, my preparation and my opportunity, all those years that I've worked are what's going to get me through this, are what's going to get luck coming in my direction. And that's the last thing I want to say on this topic is when you're looking at those self-defeating stories, when you're trying to make up the new story, what is that new story that's going to defeat that old story? Think about some of the gifts that came out of the old story, all the stuff that challenged you and set you back and held you down. What are some of the gifts you got out of it? For me, it was patience, it was discipline, it was a dogged determination that, by God, I'm going to overcome this. It was also where I got my theme, my biggest desire, my driver is I, by God, didn't want anybody else to go through what I went through. So I'm going to do all I can to possibly help others learn it. It was, don't just talk about it. I got tired of talking about it and started trying to live it. And what I realized, what I wanted to give to others was what I was denied. What I felt my limiting story, my old self-defeating story was, I don't deserve good things in my life. That's the message I got. That's what I believed as a 6-year-old, and I spent most of my adult life still believing it until I made up the new story. And it's everyone deserves the right to live a joyful, happy, contented, and successful life. And by God, I'm going to prove that to the world. That was my new story, and I'm doing that right now. And this is, being right here is part of that evidence. I want to help you do the same thing. Now, that is a great one for getting rid of some of the self-limiting beliefs. I've got another tool that I want to share with you. Go back here, and it's called a Blockbuster questions matrix. Unlike a self-defeating belief, this is a question. You say, why can't I find a job? What are the questions you find yourself constantly answering? Why does that keep happening? Why can't I lose weight? Why did that person listen to me? Why can't I find a job? We ask ourselves these questions all day long. and they tend to be very self-defeating. Instead of why can't I find a job, an empowering question generally is going to be a what or a who. Why usually leads you right back to the self-defeating question. The how can be the same thing as well. If you don't know why, if you don't know how, you're right back to where you were. If you ask what on there or who, you start making progress on there. For instance, why can't I find a job? Some empowering questions that might result from that are, what new steps can I take to find a job? What new approaches could I try to finding a job? Who can I connect with to help me find a job? Now, you'll notice one of the things I love about the questions matrix here. When you use that approach, that what on there, when you use this matrix, you start building an action plan immediately simply by answering your own empowering questions. When you say, why can't I find a job? Well, you can go back to the old beliefs of racism or discrimination. There's all kinds of things you can go in there that just take you down. There's no upside to asking, why can't I find a job? There's a lot of upside to asking, what new steps can I take to find a job? Or these other questions. What happens when you start doing that, like I said, there's an action plan that starts to develop. Get help with my resume. That's one thing you might be able to do. Do more networking. If all you've done is apply online and online isn't working, well, what new approaches could I do? Try with my job. Gee, try networking. You're meeting face to face instead of in front of a computer. I would love to be in front of you in person rather than learning through here. But if all you're doing is just you one-sided interacting with the computer, there's not much there. You don't have much progress you can make in that regard. Going to a network meeting, well, that's something new. That's something you can try that hasn't, you maybe haven't tried before or you haven't worked at before. Who can I connect with that we find a job? Well, gee, who could I connect with? Well, what kind of job you're looking for? That might be another one in there. What kind of jobs do I want on there? Do informational interviews. They might be able to tell you more information. The networking again is going back to who do you connect with? Are there vets who have had successful experience? What did they do? Connect with them. What other jobs should I explore? Or what other jobs am I qualified for? If you've been looking for one thing and it's not making any progress, or you realize that might have been what I was doing in the military, but that's not really what I want to do in civilian life. I got kind of tired of that over there. I want to do something new now. And this will let you, with a new answer, get there. Investigate being maybe a business analyst instead of a project manager. Those questions can really start quickly adding up into an action plan of things you can do, concrete things you can do to lift yourself out of that self-defeating position that you put yourself in. Why can't I lose weight? Well, what steps can I start taking today to lose weight? Sign up for Noom or Weight Watchers, enlist family and friends to keep me on track, join a gym. There's a ton of answers to that question, but I hope you can see where asking that question of what steps can take today to start losing weight is a whole lot more powerful than why can't I lose weight? The why can't I lose weight question leads you right back into self-defeating, limiting thoughts and beliefs on that. You go nowhere except sinking further in the mud. When you ask yourself the empowering question, it transforms it into, just answering the question I just asked, now I can do something. What's the answer to why can't I lose weight? Well, you may come up with a million things that doesn't really move you. When you come up and phrase it in a positive way, it gives you a concrete action plan of what you can do. Why do I always seem to run out of time? What habits can I develop to get rid of not enough time stress? That might be a good question to ask on there. Instead of always saying, well, gee, it was the traffic, it was the phone calls, it was the dog, it was the kids, whatever, you start looking for concrete action you can take. You write out a plan each day for the morning. learn how to say no to people and projects that take time away from what I need to be doing, or start using a daily planner. All those things can be tools that make a big difference for you in the day-to-day, in the day-to-day operations on there. See, I go back in here trying to get out of that. I don't know if you were seeing this slide. In any case, hopefully if you get that idea, and they're using the matrix to help you move ahead with that. Now, I've got one more quick thing I'm going to give to you. This will only take just a minute, and I'll answer questions for you. And that I call the power or the gift of failure. When you, let's see, get over here to the right place, right screen. When you think about it, there is no such thing as failure. I love this one. When you fail and you believe you failed, yep, you failed. But when you look at it, every failure actually has an opportunity to teach you, to teach something, for you to learn something. It has an opportunity for you to reflect on something, a self-revelation on there, or actually a foundation of something major, new direction to go in. Nothing is a failure. When you look at it, what's the gift I can get out of that failure? You're moving ahead. You're going to learn something, you're going to get a redirection, you're going to reflection, or you're going to get a foundation, something totally new set up. So there is no thing as failure. The old adage of the Thomas Edison, he failed 1,000 times to invent the light bulb. And he said, and his answer was, I didn't fail. I just found 1,000 ways it didn't work until I found the one that did. It's along those lines, but if you look at it, you have a problem, you had a failure, you had a challenge. What did you learn from it? What was the reflection? What was the revelation? Maybe there's something new direction, some new foundation for something exciting going to happen. So start looking at that as well. Hopefully these tools, hopefully I explained them fairly clearly for you. These are designed to take a long time to go through rather than putting all three of them in 20 minutes. It's, a week or two on each question when I'm working with somebody in my coaching program. But I wanted to give you some tools that can make some immediate impact for you and start helping you immediately, improving your prospects, whether it's job hunting or if you're already in the business or thinking about starting business, some tools can help you there. I want to thank Alan for inviting me and thank all of you for listening. Hopefully you got something out of it. And if you got questions, I'm totally open to your questions right now.